Welcome back to Mac Talks of Football. In this video, we are gonna take a look back at my prediction for Bundesliga 24-25 and see how many of my predictions came true and how many of them were completely wrong. We are just going to basically follow the same model that I did for League One. If I predicted, for example, that Bayern Munich are going to finish 5th and ended up finishing 1st, I am going to get about 4 points. And the same, if I predicted something, for example, Borussia Dortmund to finish at 2nd and ended up finishing 7th, again, I'm going to get 5 points. So the goal is to get as less points as possible. That shows my predictions were quite good. I'll be very honest, if I get around 30 to 40 points between anything like that, I would think that my predictions were quite good. Above 40, I would still say it is good, but if anything more than 50, I think it is a disastrous predictions that I did. So let's go ahead and start. Number 18, I went with St. Pauli. They ended up finishing 14. They had a really good season, in my opinion. The start was not that good. They struggled, and I expected that to happen. I mean, they were coming back to Bundesliga after about 13 years out of it. They had a new manager. The manager that brought them up, Fabian Husler, he had left to join Brighton. So they had a new manager in charge. They had an inexperienced side who really did not know how to play in Bundesliga. So I thought all of this was gonna result in them going straight back down. But credit to them, they really had a really good season. And I think after about match day 9 or 10, after that they really did not get back into that relegation zone. They were 14, 15. They hovered around it, but they never get back. Went into those relegation places, and they ended up finishing 14th, which was a really good first season back in the Bundesliga for them. At 17th, I went with Holstein Kiel. They ended up finishing 17th as well. So I got that 100% accurate. So no points again. I mean, it was their first ever season in the Bundesliga, and I just felt, they were going to struggle, and they struggled. I mean, apart from match, they won. They spent the entirety of the campaign in those relegation, places, either 17th or 18th. They never went above 17th after match day 2. That just shows how much of a bad season they had. I mean, just 6 wins in the entire campaign, 21 defeats. It was a poor season for Holstein Kiel, and unfortunately their stay in the Bundesliga was quite short, and they went back straight into Bundesliga 2. Moving on, at 16th, I went with Mainz, and for a perfect tally of 0 for Holstein Kiel, I get 10 points added to my tally because Mainz ended up finishing 6th. I mean, I got that completely wrong, to be very honest with you. I mean, their transfer business was barely anything. They really did not sign anybody. They had like just 2 signings, and they had 3-4 loans. I really did not think that squad was gonna do that good in the league, but I was completely wrong, to be very honest with you. I mean, Bo Henriksen did an amazing job with his team, and they were on the verge of qualifying in the race for qualifying for the Champions League as well. They ended up finishing 6th. They ended up qualifying for Conference League, so it is a big deal for them. They are back in Europe. They are going to compete in that Conference League. So an amazing season. And let's be honest, nobody really thought that Mainz were going to do this good at the start of the season. So I accept that I got it completely wrong. And I mean, that 10 points, that's a big margin of error. I got completely wrong. But yeah, congratulations to Mainz for a terrific season. At 15th, I went with Bochum. They ended up finishing at 18. They finished bottom, so I got got them 3 positions wrong. I mean, they had a terrible season. They had a bad season last year where they finished 16 and they had to play that relegation promotion playoff game. I just thought they were a bit better, this year, and I thought they might end up finishing 15th. I just, because of Mainz's a terrible business, I just thought that they were going to have a better season. But unfortunately for Bochum, they ended up having a worse season than the year before. They ended up finishing 18, and just like Holstein Kiel, after the first game of the season, they never really came back from match day 2 up until match day 34. They were just in the relegation zone. 16th, 18th, 17th, those were the positions that they held, and they ended up in that 18th position. A terrible season, and unfortunately their stay in the Bundesliga came to an end. At 14th, I went with Wolfsburg. They ended up finishing 11th, so that's another 3 points for me. I mean, they had a really mixed sort of a transfer window, and I thought they were gonna have I thought from 14th to 8th, I thought it was going to be quite tight with all the teams that I predicted. It was going to be quite a tough mid-table, and I said at the start of the season that any team could replace anyone in these positions, because it was quite really hard to predict. They ended up finishing 11th. They had a much better season than I predicted, and to be very honest, they could have had a much better, even better season than the one that they had. I mean, they were 7th after match day 24, but after that it became quite a bad end to the season. Just they won once in their last 10 games. Otherwise, they were big talks of maybe they them qualifying for Europe, but unfortunately the last 10 games were a disastrous, and that ended up getting their manager sacked as well. So quite a bad end to the season, but still they're still better than what I predicted. I think that Wolfsburg fans are going to be quite disappointed, because there was a big chance that they would have ended up qualifying for Europe, but let's hope it's a better one for them next season. At 13, I went with a Union Berlin, and they finished at 13 as well. So that's another 100% accurate prediction for me. I mean, they had the season that I sort of predicted. I said they were going to struggle, but they would end up finishing, in that mid-table position, and that's the type of season they had. They had a manager sacked in Bo Svensson. He was sacked, during the Christmas break, and they brought in Kevin Baumgart, who sort of guided them back to to the upper half of of that mid-table. Otherwise, they were really languishing in the in the bottom half, fighting for relegation when Svensson was sacked. And the start for Baumgart was not that good as well, but he managed to somehow steer them clear to safety, and they are going to be in the Bundesliga next season. And I think that's what the fans want, to be very honest as well. At 12th, I went with Werder Bremen. They ended up finishing 8th. They had quite a good season. Another 4 points, for me in that tally. But for Bremen, I think they had a really good season. That the end of the season was really good. I mean, they were continuously, they were in that, from 8 to 12 position throughout the season. And it felt like, they were going to finish in one of those places. But as I said, the end of the season was really good for them. 6 wins out of a possible 10 games, and just 1 defeat, the other 3 being draws. So they finished really strong. And there was time, where they were, favorites to finish in those European places. So they would be really disappointed with those draws at the, in the last 5 games. There were 3 draws that really halted their chances of finishing in the European places. But apart from that, as I said, quite a good season for them, finishing in the top 8, qualifying for the quarterfinals of the DFB Pokal as well. So all in all, quite a good season. They would hope that the next season is better than this one. At 11th, I went with Borussia Mönchengladbach. They ended up finishing at 10, so almost similar, just a 1 point. I thought they were going to be, within these places, and I kept on saying, they had made one of the most underrated transfers of last season. I said at the start of the season, and it turned out to be true. I mean, Tim Kleindes, nobody really paid that much attention. Just 7 million euros for him, and he ended up bagging 16 goals. I mean, he had an amazing season. And Mönchengladbach themselves, I think they had a really good season. Unfortunately for them, the end of the season was not that good. Otherwise, just like Werder Bremen, there were talks of maybe Mönchengladbach sneaking into those European places, but the end of the season really derailed them, and they were not really able to then qualify for Europe, and ended up finishing top. And I still think it was a good season, and I would hope that they can continue this and try to get into the European places, which this season seemed quite gettable. But overall, a top 10 finish, it was quite a good season for them. At 10th, I went with Heidenheim, and they ended up being my second worst prediction after Mainz. They ended up finishing 16th. So another 6 points added to my tally. I mean, when I made a prediction, I said that they were going to be in Europe. They had a really good season last year, that they were going to be in Europe. They're going to play there. That is going to stretch their squad. And unfortunately for them, they were really bad in the transfer market. They really did not bring good players in, and they ended up selling, some of their important players. I mean, they sold Kleindes, as I just mentioned a couple of minutes ago, to Bremen. I think that was quite a bad decision, and they never really replaced them, and they had quite a poor transfer window, and that showed in the season. As the season went by, as the European games came on, they started getting injuries, and their squad was not there. They did not do that good in the Conference League as well, and then in the league, I mean, they are lucky. They in the last 5 games, they ended up winning 2 games, and they had a draw. Getting 7 points out of a possible 15. That kept them to 16. Otherwise, there was a chances of them ended up finishing 17th or 18th and going out directly, getting relegated directly to Bundesliga 2. They got a chance to finish in 16th and play that relegation promotion playoff, which they won. So they are going to be back in the Bundesliga next season. So that's a positive. But as a season on a whole, it was quite a complete disaster, and they would hope that next season is much better than the previous one. At number 9, I went with Hoffenheim, and then they, along with Heidenheim, were my second worst prediction, because they also finished 15th, another 6 points added to my tally. I mean, it was quite a weird one, to be very honest with you. I really did not expect them to have such a bad season. I, put them at 9th because I said that they are going to be in Europe. It is going to be their first time there as well. They were in the Europa League, and I said that they were going to struggle with the games in Europe and in the Bundesliga as well. But I really did not expect them to have such a bad season. And it's unlike Heidenheim, they really invested in their squad. They spent about 70 million euros in the transfer window, and beefed up their squad as well. But unfortunately for them, they went out in the group stages of the Europa League and in the league, in the Bundesliga as well. I mean, they never really recovered from the games. They ended up finishing 15th. They never went into that relegation places, but there was always the chance that they were in that battle up until the last day of the season. But they would be really happy that they finished 15th, and they are going to be in the Bundesliga next season. And I mean, this year they don't really have to spend that much money. They have a good squad, and they can really carry it forward and try to get back in Europe in the next season. But for this season, they would really like to forget what happened, to be very honest with you. 8th, I went with Freiburg. They ended up finishing 5th. I mean, they had an amazing season. Their transfer window was really good. They brought in players that they needed in the squad, and they really strengthened as well. And then the season that they had, I mean, they had a really good start of the season. The middle of the season was a bit turbulence. Then they had a really good end up until the last 3-4 weeks. It looked like they were going to win the Champions League. They were one of the favorites to finish in the Champions League, but they somehow fumbled it, to be very honest with you. Up until the last day of the season, they just needed a win, and they ended up losing to Frankfurt at 3-1. That meant Dortmund toppled them to the 4th position. They ended up finishing 5th. They are going to be in the Europa League next season, so that's a big thing. They are going to play in Europe, and I think that's a good thing for Freiburg. But they would be really, really disappointed how the things ended up. I mean, just getting 4 wins in the last 10 games, that really derailed them. 4 draws and 2 defeats. Especially that last day defeat is going to really bum them out, because there was a big chance of them playing in the Champions League. But as I said, playing in the Europa League, it is going to be really good for them, give them experience, and they would hope that they don't end up like Hoffenheim or Heidenheim, and they can do better than them in Europe and in the league next season as well. At 7th, I went with Freiburg. They ended up finishing at 12th. I mean, they had a weird season, to be very honest with you. Augsburg, they were basically, like a pendulum, going up and down, going up and down. You really did not know where they were going to finish. I thought, their score was quite good to finish in the top 10, and I think it was that Heidenheim and Hoffenheim, both of them are in European competition, and that is going to stretch them out, and that's why they are going to finish in that 8-9 finish. And Augsburg have a stable squad, and they are going to pounce on this opportunity, and they are going to try to fight for European places. And to be very honest with you, they were in that top 10 for a number, or for a majority part of the season. They were in that area. But at the end of the season, really got them 4 defeats in their last 4 games. That really hurt them and got them out of the top 10, and that's why they're finishing in that 12th position. I got another 4 points, and unfortunately for their manager, they sacked him at the end of the season because they were not really happy. And I sort of agree that it was not a really good season for Augsburg, and they would hope that the new manager can come in and they can have a better season than the one they had last year. At 6th, I went with Frankfurt. They ended up finishing 3rd. I mean, they had an amazing season. They are going to be in the Champions League next season, so that's already a positive. But this season, they were, really good. I mean, for me, they were one of the most, entertaining sides to watch in the entirety of Europe. The way that they played football, I mean, kudos to their manager. The way that they play. That's why you watch football. You watch Frankfurt and you feel good as a football fan. They had 2 amazing talents up front. Omar Marmoush, who he was a sensation in the first half of the season. That's why Manchester City snapped him up. But then Hugo Ekitike, I mean, he took at the first half of the season, he was playing as sort of the wingman for Omar Marmoush. But then when Marmoush went, Ekitike became the main man, and then he carried forward Frankfurt. They were at one time really challenging for the title against Bayern Munich and Leverkusen. But of course, the inexperience and not having the squad and to match Bayern Munich, their title challenge fell short. But they ended up finishing 3rd, as I said, and they qualified for the Champions League. So a great season for them, and they would hope that it can get better. There are big rumors that Ekitike might leave as well, but we'll see what happens in that regard. But as for now, a great end to the season, and they would hope they can get better and better in the next season. At fifth, I went with Stuttgart. They ended up finishing a 9-4 places below than I thought they would. I mean, they sort of had that effect that I thought it would happen to other teams, and it sort of happened to other teams as well, like what they were who were in Europe. They played in the Champions League. The performance in the Champions League was not that good. They got out in the first round, and in the league as well. I mean, they were quite up and down throughout the season. It felt like they were, at one point it looked like they were, sneaking through the in one of those European places. But the performances in the league was not really that good, and they ended up finishing 9. They won the DFB Pokal, so that means they are going to play in the Europa League. So they still have that attraction of playing in Europe. So, and they would hope that the next season is better than this, and they can still somehow qualify, get back into those Champions League places and play in the Champions League again and prove that they are better, because this year it was not a good output from them in the Champions League and as well as in the Bundesliga as well. Fourth, I went with RB Leipzig. They ended up finishing 7th. To me, like, Leipzig had quite a bad season, to be very honest with you. The start of the season was really, really good. It looked like they were, going to challenge for the title at the start of the season. They were one of the only teams alongside Bayern Munich who went unbeaten for the first 6-7 games. They were the team that ended Leverkusen's, 1 year winning undefeated streak as well. So it was looking very good for Bayern Munich. But after match 12-13 for Leipzig, and things started going really bad for them, and they started dropping points. They started losing games, and it kept on going worse for them, and they ended up getting getting their manager sacked as well, unfortunately. And at the end of the season, it was just get to the end of the season and somehow survive and stay in those European places. But unfortunately for them, they were not really able to do that. For the majority of the season, they stayed in that top 4, but as I said, as the season went on, they kept on getting worse and worse and ended up finishing outside of Europe. So it's a big setback for Leipzig. They are not going to be in Europe next season. From a team who's been consistently in the European tournaments, it is quite a big setback, and they would hope that next season is better and they get back in those European competitions. In third, I went with Bayern Munich. And they ended up finishing first. My thinking was I was not really a big fan of Vincent Kompany. I really did not think that he was the right man for the job. I think I thought that they were making a mistake in hiring him. And for the majority of the first half of the season, I still thought that it was not going to be an easy task for Vincent Kompany, to end up winning the title. As the season went by, and a lot of things happened that helped Vincent Kompany. I'll be very honest, he got me, wrong. I was not completely wrong about him, to be very honest with you. Their performances in Europe are still not what you expect from Bayern Munich. Their performances in the Bundesliga as well as are not what you expect Bayern Munich to be. They really did not dominate the league as you would have expected them to do with the players that they have, with the squad that they have. I still think he's not the right guy, but he has won them the championship, so nobody's not really not going to question him. But to be very honest with you, he got the job done. They were okayish for the majority of the season, and then they really peaked at the end of the last season. With the teams below them not really winning the games when it mattered. It went really close up until match day 28, 29, 30. It looked like it could go either way, but Leverkusen kept on dropping points, and that helped Bayern Munich. They ended up winning champions. So as I said, I got it completely wrong, and Bayern Munich became champions. At second, I went with Borussia Dortmund. They ended up finishing fourth. I mean, it was quite a weird season for Borussia Dortmund. They had a disastrous start. I mean, 70% of their season was quite bad. Nuri Sahin came in, and it was, he's a club legend. I thought he knows Dortmund inside out. He has worked, within Dortmund before becoming their manager. So I thought he had that the information, and he has that connection with the club. He knows how they want to play. Unfortunately for Sahin and unfortunately for Dortmund, it didn't really work out. They brought in Niko Kovac, who himself did not have a really good start, but he got Dortmund playing, and they had a really great end to the season, and they ended up finishing second. They ended up finishing fourth and barely qualifying for the Champions League, which was very essential on the last day of the season with Freiburg losing to Frankfurt. That really helped them, and Dortmund qualified for the Champions League, finishing fourth. I get another 2 points in that regard as well, and Dortmund would hope that that next season is a much better one than this year, because in the Champions League as well they were not really that good, if I'm being very honest with you. And finally, I went with Bayer Leverkusen. At first, they ended up finishing second. I thought they were going to repeat their historic feat, and they were going to get a second title, Bundesliga title, but unfortunately for them, they were not really able to do that. They had too many draws for me this year. I mean, there were so many games where they ended up just throwing the points away, and they were too lethargic. I think they were too relaxed, to be very honest with you, and that costed them quite a lot. At the end of the season, as I said, it's still quite tight, and it looked like it could be anybody's title, but they just kept drawing games, and that really hurt them, and that is why they were not the champions. And because of that, I get a 1 point added to my tally, and that is it. These were my prediction, and these are the results. I got 60 points if my calculations are correct. 60 points I have gained the total tally, and I mean, it is a disastrous result, to be very honest with you. I mean, I got 46 for League One, and I was like, okay, it's not that bad. But for Bundesliga, it is 60 points. I mean, let's be very honest, the three main teams that really, screwed me over were Mainz, Hoffenheim, and Heidenheim. I mean, 22 points just from those 3 points. Just from those three teams has really racked up the points tally. But it is what it is. I still think the mid-table was quite okay. A lot of teams surprised me as well. I mean, a lot of teams really had bad seasons. I mean, Heidenheim, Hoffenheim, Stuttgart, Leipzig, all of them had really bad seasons. So I cannot really do anything. Augsburg as well. I mean, it's like 5-6 teams. If they end up having a bad season, you can't really predict that. But that is it for me in this video. Let me know what you think of my prediction and how much bad I got. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Like the video, share it as well. Click on the notification bell, and of course subscribe to the channel. I'm trying to get to 600 subscribers before the end of July, so please go ahead and subscribe and help the channel out. Until next time, bye bye.